Should know in the next 24 hours which charges the man accused of killing a 5-year-old girl could face.
The Cass County attorney says he will meet with law enforcement and plans to have charges by noon tomorrow. The BCA is releasing information.
State investigators just dropped chilling autopsy details. That is absolutely correct, Allie. The preliminary medical examiner report confirms the unthinkable. Death by homicidal violence. I pressed authorities on what that actually entails. Officials bluntly stated the findings point to an absolutely deliberate, brutal execution. The family remains completely isolated from the media. However, an insider who stopped by their residence revealed that Alayna's mother is entirely shattered, completely consumed by an unimaginable grief. Picture a peaceful 5-year-old drifting off in her own bedroom, nestled safely inside a tight-knit Midwestern community where neighbors trust everyone. The clock strikes 2 o'clock in the morning. August 20th, 2016. Mom just finished tucking her away, securing her favorite blanket, and giving a final forehead kiss. Absolute silence, pure suburban safety. At daybreak, she vanished. 0 shattered glass, 0 busted locks, not a single muffled scream, simply erased. Prepare yourself for the sickening truth. This monster was never some random predator stalking from the dark perimeter. This wasn't an anonymous threat breaching the walls. He was already planted deeply inside the home, breathing the exact same air. A supposed buddy of her dad. A guy so deeply trusted by the parents that letting him crash over felt entirely harmless and perfectly routine. These dark investigations do far more than merely rock a peaceful neighborhood to its core. It completely fractures your reality, forcing you to brutally question anyone sharing your dinner table. Tonight, we dissect every single hour, every agonizing minute, and every terrifying step leading toward the most catastrophic betrayal in Minnesota's history. A nightmare born inside a tranquil bedroom during a sweltering late summer night, dropping a tiny rural town into an abyss of horror that no one, not seasoned detectives, trusting locals, nor his closest associates, could ever have possibly predicted. The disturbing details ahead will permanently burn themselves into your psyche long after the screen goes black. To grasp the sheer gravity of this destruction, you must analyze the backdrop. Watkins, Minnesota. Barely 1,000 residents. Nestled deep within the state's center, it is a sleepy rural haven where folks casually ignore their deadbolts. A place where friendly porch greetings remain mandatory. Everyone knows your exact bloodline going back decades. You won't find violent metro headlines or gruesome scandals dominating their local evening broadcasts. It operates solely on blind community faith, deeply rooted familiarity, and unspoken security. Yet, barely 30 days prior to this July 2016 nightmare, Watkins endured another brutal strike. A massive twister ambushed the area out of nowhere, shredding properties, uprooting massive oaks, and forcing a weary population into an agonizing cleanup process. Folks were drained completely. Spirits were crushed. Yet, typical of resilient rural America, they pushed forward to rebuild. Standing amidst that localized chaos were the Ertls. Matt and Kayla were raising kids there, leaning into the exact rustic charm this community promised. Anchoring their entire universe was an energetic 5-year-old little girl named Alayna. To comprehend exactly why this tragedy absolutely paralyzed the state of Minnesota, you must look closely at Alayna herself. She was never merely a statistic inside an evidence folder. She was pure electricity. Barely 5 years into life, she charmed anyone who met her, obsessed with pinks, purples, and playing princess. Yet, almost simultaneously, she would shadow her father toward the shed, scale a roof fearlessly, and gladly embrace the grime. Kayla noted her daughter's absence from kindergarten was instantly felt by everyone. Her missing presence echoed. Fast forward to October 31st, hardly 2 months past that fateful August horror. Alayna should have celebrated turning 6. Her special day naturally fell on Halloween. Spooky outfits, endless sweets, joyous screams and frosting. A massive celebration the parents spent months eagerly planning. No one suspected those happy preparations were entirely in vain. That innocent illusion is exactly what this predator destroyed, which explains why the brutal fallout devastated the psyche of the public. So, let us rewind to the evening the nightmare ignited. August 19th, 2016, a typical Friday dusk in Watkins. Matt Ertl and his buddy, Coworker Zachary Anderson wrapped up a local softball tournament. Utterly mundane. The two were regular teammates out on the diamond. Following the matchup, channeling classic small-town Americana traditions, the guys ventured out to grab some drinks and decompress. They immediately hit the Riverside Tavern, a dive bar, cold beers, laughing teammates. It felt like a perfectly ordinary Midwestern summer evening, but that comforting illusion was about to be violently shattered. When last call hit near 1 a.m, the pair stumbled over to Gord's, a watering hole sitting uncomfortably close to the Ertl residence. Inside that quiet suburban home, Kayla remained wide awake, watching over her young children. By 2 o'clock on that dark August 20th morning, 5-year-old Alayna had finally drifted off right on the living room floor. Her mother scooped her up, walked softly down the dark corridor, tucked her into bed, and wrapped a beloved cartoon character blanket snugly around her little frame. That familiar piece of fabric gave her comfort every single evening. Hours later, it would transform into a chilling piece of evidence in a nightmare scenario. Matt finally walked through the front door at roughly 2:30 in the morning. Zachary Anderson dragged himself in moments later, slipping inside sometime between 3:30 and 3:45. They shot the breeze for a bit, totally unsuspecting, before crashing hard around 4 o'clock. Crashing on their couch wasn't some strange occurrence for Zachary. He was practically family, deeply trusted and completely welcomed. No alarms went off in their heads. Yet in the dead silence between 4 and 8:30 in the morning, an unspeakable evil invaded their sanctuary. And terrifyingly, not a single soul woke up. 8:30 rolls around on August 20th, 2016. The parents open their eyes, instantly suffocated by a sense of creeping dread. Sprinting to their daughter's room, they find tangled sheets and zero trace of her. Panic sets in as they tear through closets, hallways, and bathrooms. The little girl has vanished. Worse still, a glance outside reveals Matt's 2002 work pickup has been completely erased from the pavement. Even his personal smartphone is nowhere to be found. The trusted friend who had crashed under their very roof, gone like a ghost. The sheer, suffocating terror gripping those parents is a living hell no mother or father should endure. Desperation fueled a frantic, tearful hunt across the entire property. They scoured the lawn and combed through neighboring lots until the chilling reality sank in. They needed heavy backup. Exactly at 9:56, frantic pleas reached the local dispatch. Cruisers rolled up fast, but the truth hit even faster. This wasn't a kid taking a morning stroll, this was something deeply sinister. The scene screamed calculated kidnapping. Detectives instantly mobilized, hunting down any potential shadow of a lead. Digital footprints were traced, carriers were subpoenaed, and the resulting data drop froze the blood of every cop in the room. Sometime near 6:30 that morning, the stolen device bounced a signal off a mast in Todd County, a solid 80 miles away from their hometown. The last digital breadcrumb dropped at exactly 9, still lingering in that northern territory. Then the trail went dead silent. By 1:12 that afternoon, facing a vanished 5-year-old and a phantom suspect, the brass pulled the trigger. Statewide emergency broadcast systems immediately started blaring the horrific news across Minnesota. Down in their tiny, gossip-heavy hometown, the nightmare ripped through the community. Neighbors were utterly paralyzed by the shock. A local kid snatched, allegedly by the exact same guy they were all drinking beers with on the diamond mere hours prior. Then, detectives finally caught a massive break. News broadcasts roared. Major indictments were looming for the monster suspected of snatching and murdering the 5-year-old victim. 25-year-old Zach Anderson sat rotting in a cell, heavily tied to the grim demise of the young girl. Law enforcement had dragged both the suspect and her lifeless remains out of the remote northern woods following that massive manhunt. A desperate alert that proved fatal. In town, shattered locals could do nothing but offer empty prayers for a broken family. Let's rewind. 8 in the morning, Saturday. The sheer terror sets in as mom and dad realize their little girl and their couch surfing buddy have vanished into thin air. Adding insult to injury, the family vehicle had been hijacked. 10 o'clock hits, and county dispatch gets the horrifying call. Cruisers swarm the grid, begging local shops for any surveillance footage capturing the phantom getaway. By 1:12, state authorities launch a massive, frantic public warning. A critical whisper ultimately points strike teams toward an isolated rural property up north. While back home, relatives tried holding on to their crumbling sanity. Tom, A distant relative running the town's mortuary faced the grim, sickening reality of arranging a casket for his own kin. Burying anyone is tragic, but laying a violently stolen kindergartner to rest? It was a brutal, completely incomprehensible gut punch to everyone. Behind closed doors, State Crime Bureau officials quietly leaked the horrifying findings from the coroner's slab. The official cause of death? Brutal, unadulterated murder. But the strangest twist was the identity of the informant who finally tipped off the rural cops. The traitor to the killer was none other than his own flesh and blood. The dad confessed his boy had phoned at dawn, begging to hide out at their remote hunting shack in Motley, a desolate stretch 90 miles deep into the wilderness. Then, he uttered a dark, chilling secret that gave detectives the exact ammunition they needed to rip this entire conspiracy wide open. A father made a chilling call, turning in his own flesh and blood for the Amber Alert. He gave cops the green light to tear his property apart. Cruisers tore out of the station in a matter of seconds, pushing hard toward the northern county line. Behind the wheel, every single badge gripped onto a desperate, fading prayer that they would pull little Alayna out of there breathing. Hitting the desolate stretch of Wilderness Park Estates out in Cass County, the task force struck gold right out of the gate. Matt Ertl's hijacked truck sat ditched deep inside a jagged gully on the Anderson family plot. The angle of the vehicle screamed foul play. That truck did not just drift off the road. Somebody strategically buried it in the brush to buy time. Tactical teams descended on the isolated structure, slicing through the interior piece by piece. The stash inside froze their blood. Guns, scattered ammo, and a scribbled manifesto tied to Zachary Anderson, a haunting letter spelling out a seriously dark endgame. Signs of a struggle stained the space, yet the suspect had vanished into thin air, and the little girl was nowhere in sight. The manhunt rapidly spilled out into the dense timber and suffocating bogs bordering the perimeter. Lawman William Connor unclipped his canine asset, Yankee, picking up a ghost of a trail by the abandoned wheels. The dog caught a whiff, dragging his handler headfirst into the brutal, tangled marshland. With every plunging stride into the muck, the dread multiplied. Then, right at 4:24 in the afternoon, roughly a quarter mile from the shack, the ghost materialized. Zachary Todd Anderson was looming knee-deep in the stagnant water, completely mute. He never bothered bolting. He barely even flinched. He was a statue in the mud. A brave officer locked eyes with the suspect, demanding the only answer the world needed. Where is she? The response that slithered out of Zachary Anderson's throat is pure nightmare fuel. The suspect stared dead through the officer and muttered, "What little girl?" Detectives instantly slammed him with his Miranda warnings. He lawyered up 3 separate times, shutting down the interrogation with ice-cold precision. Yet swallowed by that black lagoon, a sliver of hope lingered that the 5-year-old from Watkins, Minnesota, was still breathing. Every single badge sinking into that sludge felt the ticking clock. So they pushed the envelope. No screaming, no force. Just a hauntingly calm, razor-sharp persistence born from the terrifying reality that a toddler was teetering on the edge of oblivion. They laid their cards on the table. We have got to get her back. We have to return her to her people. You hold the key to ending this right this second. Dead air. They probed again. Is she buried in this bog, or are we chasing ghosts somewhere else? A suffocating quiet choked the airspace. Then, slipping out like a venomous hiss, he confessed, in the swamp. The task force hammered him twice more to lock down that damning statement. Then they challenged him to navigate them directly to the spot. He demanded a smoke, took a drag, and led the way into the darkness. Wading through the sludge, dragging the posse through the rotting underbrush of rural Cass County, he suddenly froze, his finger aimed squarely at a pitch-black pocket of the wetlands. That exact grid coordinate is where they unearthed Alayna, submerged beneath a pile of rotting wreckage. Down in the south quadrant of Wilderness Park Estates, about 75 feet out, a police dog locked onto a fresh track, pulling units to a secondary drop zone. That is the spot where they recovered her Elsa security blanket, the exact fabric her mom tucked around her tiny frame hours prior. Promptly at 6:02 in the evening on August 20th, 2016, Sheriff Brian Cruz dropped the hammer. The statewide broadcast was killed. Alayna Ertl was gone forever. In one soul-crushing heartbeat, the sleepy enclave of Watkins, Minnesota, had its innocence violently ripped away forever. As the clock kept ticking, the detective work mutated into a full-blown homicide pursuit. The coroner's autopsy nailed down the darkest suspicions swirling in the minds of the cops since they dragged her from the bog. The grim forensics sketched a portrait of a bloodbath so twisted, so methodically executed, that veteran homicide detectives were left utterly speechless. The sheer gravity of the atrocities committed against a 5-year-old child, someone who trusted this predator, someone who never saw the monster hiding behind a familiar face, crashed down on Minnesota like an unshakable nightmare. Crowds flocked to Watkins today to say their heartbreaking goodbyes to a 5-year-old victim. Alayna Ertl was snatched directly from her own bedroom last Saturday by a trusted family companion crashing on their couch. Her vanishing ignited a massive statewide alarm, a frantic chase that tragically flatlined in a grim marshland north of Motley. A critical lead dragged investigators to a remote woodland shack, where they stumbled into a graveyard holding both the victim and the prime suspect. 25-year-old Zachary Anderson is currently facing the music for abduction, predatory assault, and murder. Digging deeper, disturbing red flags about his past are surfacing, tracing all the way back to his high school days, specifically his creepy fixation on a former Monticello local. Today, correspondent Bill Hudson tracked down a surviving witness, reporting live from the desk with explosive new details. A decade of silence. It defies logic to think he wasn't hunting other prey women, kids in the 10 blank years between his first obsession and the snatching of Alayna Ertl. Zachary Anderson, 25 years old, slapped with 19 separate felony charges. The rap sheet was a nightmare. Murder in the first and second degrees, criminal acts with a minor, 2 abduction charges, desecrating a corpse, and theft. The judge hammered down a $1 million conditional bail, or $2 million without strings. But this was merely the prologue. Because once detectives began excavating Anderson's buried history, they unearthed a chilling mystery that the traumatized town of Watkins absolutely could not ignore. Did everyone miss the glaring red flags? Did the justice system catch a glimpse of this monster years ago, only to look the other way while tragedy brewed? The truth is a tough pill to swallow. To track the origins of this evil, you must rewind a full decade, back to 2006, back to a sleepy suburban street in Wright County, Minnesota. Here, a teenage Anderson lived right beside a vulnerable target, a single mom raising 2 kids alone. On the surface, it was the picture-perfect American dream. Just a typical Midwestern block where folks waved from porches and shadows supposedly never fell. But beneath that veneer, creeping dread took hold. The neighbor confessed to detectives his bizarre fixations terrified her immediately. It started with creepy letters tucked under her windshield wipers, relentless, obsessive scribbles calling her gorgeous, begging for a callback, demanding her undivided attention. She was a fully grown adult. He was barely a teen. But this was no innocent puppy, love. It radiated a dark, suffocating energy she couldn't simply ignore. By December of 2006, the obsession turned violent. At 1:30 in the dead of night, explosive pounding on her front door shocked her awake. It was Anderson, screaming to be let inside. This wasn't some lost, confused kid. His tone was cold, commanding, and dangerous. He rattled the doorknob, violently trying to breach her sanctuary. The sudden appearance of her boyfriend was the only thing that scared him back into the dark, but the nightmare hadn't ended. Fast forward to June 2007. While the young mother tucked her kids into bed upstairs, Anderson silently popped a first-floor window screen and slithered into her living room like a ghost. He prowled through the dark house, swiped her cell phone off the coffee table, and vanished back into the blackness. A monster hiding in plain sight. Facing home invasion allegations, he quietly secured a heavily downgraded plea agreement. The judge merely handed down public service hours, demanding nothing more than a simple written apology. Shielded by his youth, those dark files were permanently sealed. Just a disturbed 16-year-old boy attempting to physically overpower the woman next door. Justice seemingly caught up when he breached her house while she slumbered above. It all started with eerie, handwritten messages left on her vehicle. Keeping her identity concealed, this survivor was hunted by Zachary Anderson, a full decade before he was finally apprehended for the abduction, horrific violation, and brutal murder of 5-year-old Alayna. The stalker's twisted letters asked if she needed a partner, leaving behind his personal digits. At 31, Sharing a property line with Anderson and his mom, she initially brushed the creepy advances off as foolish adolescent nonsense. She'd casually flash the bizarre notes to friends, playfully bragging about having a mysterious shadow leaving her love letters. Treating the obsession like a harmless prank, she ignored the red flags. But the terrifying reality surfaced as his hostility rapidly escalated, mutating from swiped smokes to a chilling winter encounter, appearing outside wearing absolutely nothing but his underwear. Completely stunned, she questioned his presence. I told him point blank, absolutely not. Never. Fast forward a few months. Her family was dead asleep upstairs when Anderson tore off a window screen, slithering inside just to swipe her phone. The system let him cop a plea for the break-in. His so-called punishment included penning a forced note of remorse. It amounted to a couple pathetic lines, basically just him tossing out a fake apology for creeping me out. Today, like everyone else looking back, she is entirely paralyzed. A visceral sickness took over. Nobody could have predicted his disturbing fixation 10 years prior would breed such an unimaginably ruthless bloodbath. The Watkins family handed over the keys to their sanctuary, completely blind to the terrifying history of the man watching their kids. Pure terror eventually drove her to abandon that house completely, desperate to find a place where she could finally breathe. When those chilling news alerts about Zachary Anderson flashed across screens in August 2016, her world instantly collapsed into the abyss. Stepping in front of cameras wasn't for clout, yet she exposed this living nightmare, solely to stop the next victim. It was a glaring red flag, chilling proof that ignoring a predator's early warning signs never makes them vanish. The residents of Watkins were left paralyzed by one haunting unknown. Had authorities actually taken action back in 2006, would an innocent child in rural Minnesota still be breathing 10 years later? But the nightmare was far from over. The real battle was just beginning behind closed courtroom doors. What unfolded next transformed this tragedy into a twisted procedural thriller, one that pushed legal boundaries to their breaking point, savagely attacked the detectives' fieldwork, and put the state completely on the defensive. Zachary Anderson stared the judge down and brazenly pleaded not guilty to all 19 counts. His legal team struck immediately. Their opening gambit was attempting to toss out the evidence, claiming investigators had completely trampled his civil liberties. They argued that even after he demanded legal counsel out in that marsh, detectives relentlessly kept grilling him. Shockingly, Cass County District Court Judge Jana Ostad actually sided with the defense. She threw out any confessions extracted after he invoked his rights, banning them entirely from the upcoming trial. Even the fact that he physically guided authorities to her remains was tossed out. Emboldened, his lawyers went straight for the throat. His attorney demanded the judge completely scrap the 19-count indictment, claiming the state had absolutely no real evidence to proceed. The magistrate shut that desperate maneuver down instantly. Every single one of the 19 counts stuck. That is when the state dropped their trump card. They proved her body would have been discovered anyway, since a massive search grid was already locked in. Search teams were already closing in on that exact spot. Furthermore, the forensic evidence, the absolute nail in the coffin, was cleared for trial. The prosecution's trap was flawlessly set, and the killer realized he was completely cornered. On March 2nd, 2018, he finally cracked. Standing before the bench, he pleaded guilty to the absolute worst offense, first-degree murder. Under oath, he confessed to snatching the child from her room and abandoning her out in the wild. The remaining 18 counts simply vanished as part of his calculated plea deal. Then came the judge's hammer: life behind bars, no parole, no mercy, and absolutely zero chance of ever walking free again. Since the state outlawed the death penalty way back in 1911, this was the absolute harshest fate legally possible. And that monster got every last excruciating second of it. The lead prosecutor faced the press, declaring their singular mission was securing the ultimate legal destruction, the permanent lockup. He got it, yet nobody was cheering. It was just a bleak, hollow end to a horror story that never should have started. The bitter truth is, legal retribution, no matter how necessary, cannot resurrect the dead. It will never bring a child back to an empty house. You cannot legally mandate a stolen laugh to return, and this shattered Midwestern town knew that dark reality all too well. As the horror settled, these folks relied on the only defense rural America possesses against pure evil. They locked arms. Flickering flames illuminated the grieving streets. Locals stood packed together in the sweltering night, using those tiny lights to silently fight back the suffocating darkness. A relief fund went live online. They blew past their initial $15,000 goal in exactly 15 hours. 15 hours. Because that is how a genuine hometown furiously protects its own. Music. Roughly 2 months later, a massive, heartbreaking shrine still spills out onto their front lawn. Music. A house that now feels like a tomb for parents agonizing over their stolen child. Is greater than. She had the absolute biggest heart. Is greater than. Everyone remembered her as this bright, incredibly dynamic kid. One minute she was obsessing over cartoon horses. The next she was out music tracking game with her father. Is greater than. She would sneak in to kiss us awake, constantly making sure we were all right. Her parents are desperately clinging to those echoes. Music. Hoarding her belongings. Fighting off the sickening thoughts of the absolute monster who stole her music away. Is greater than. She was a completely pure soul who did music absolutely nothing to deserve this. Is greater than the sickest twist? Her dad worked with the killer at a power company for 4 years. He commuted from Rapids, so after their summer league games, this predator actually slept music under their own roof. Then came that terrifying August dawn. The parents woke up to an empty house. Both their so-called friend and their daughter had vanished. Music. Along with the family truck. 3 hours into a frantic manhunt, tracking dogs finally cornered him out near a remote family cabin. They discovered her lifeless remains deep in the brush. Detectives confirmed the absolute worst. He violated her right before music. He brutally took her life. It permanently shatters your perception of the people you think you can actually trust. And how does someone sleep under your roof, share your meals, and harbor such twisted, lethal intentions? The family confesses that blind faith is dead. Anyone new is viewed with deep, chilling suspicion. Yet, humanity flickers in the dark. The relentless wave of community backing keeps them barely tethered. Mountains of letters and tributes poured in from strangers, absolutely shattered by this little girl's fate. One haunting arrival was a meticulously kept diary, chronicling an agonizing daily struggle for survival. People across the country swore to hug their children tighter, forever changed by the sudden realization that tomorrow is never promised. Her brother often whispers about the cartoons they watched, chasing the ghost of his sister's laughter. They fight through the waking nightmare solely for their boy, Carter, and a fractured town seeking solace in a newly built sanctuary. You'd spot 4 or 5 youths huddled quietly over stories, a bittersweet glimpse of innocence trying to rebuild. It became ground zero for their agonizing grief, echoing the exact innocent sentiments she would have ultimately voiced. Look for light hiding in the blackest nights. Seek out color when the storms finally break. But the ultimate defiance against this pure evil wasn't a civic movement. It was sparked by a shattered mother named Kayla. Exactly 2 agonizing months later, on October 31st Prize in Wahoshin, 2016. The precise date she should have been blowing out 6 candles. An afternoon meant for costumes and frosting, the specific magic of a Halloween birthday, became a graveyard of memories. Yet, facing an abyss that would completely break most humans, she made a fiercely defiant, deeply courageous choice. She hosted the celebration regardless. This wasn't some psychological delusion, nor a desperate escape from reality. It was an aggressive strike of affection, planting the roots for a massive undercover rebellion. That afternoon morphed into an organization named Sharing Alayna's Love, weaponizing the victim's pure soul against the darkness that took her. Smuggling gifts into pediatric wards across the region, building survival kits for devastated households. These were silent missions of mercy executed in the shadows, demanding 0 cameras or public applause. Unconditional warmth distributed freely, mirroring the victim's pure soul. Before the tragedy, her mother claimed fading skies were angels peering through the clouds, an innocent bedtime thought, utterly devoid of the crushing gravity it would soon demand. A household eternally trapped in the chilling aftermath of their daughter's brutal absence now rescues others drowning in grief. The twist? The accused kidnapper was someone they considered a trusted confidant. He snatched 5-year-old Alayna right from her bed. Detectives allege Zachary Anderson ultimately executed her in a remote, isolated patch of woods. Seeking redemption in tragedy, the relatives organized a massive charity drive, funneling every single dollar to a desperately ill child battling leukemia. The recipient, Alexis, had been struck with an aggressive, obscure, skeletal malignancy the previous fall. She spent hours sorting through donated bracelets, organizing the clandestine bidding event, finding a fleeting sliver of joy amid the chaos. Following a grueling operation, her father tearfully announced the malicious disease was entirely eradicated. The surviving relatives admit the underground network of local allies has kept them breathing since the homicide. They owe their sanity to these gatherings, fighting to preserve her legacy. Hundreds thundered down the highway on choppers, roaring for justice. However, once August 20th, 2016 hit, that innocent phrase took on a sinister undertone. Since that horrific moment, bleeding twilight skies over the Midwest feel less like a natural phenomenon and more like an eerie, painted message from beyond. Suspended in that creeping dusk, it feels exactly like the entire universe freezes in sheer terror for a few agonizing heartbeats. By 2023, the traumatized town cemented that stillness into history, erecting a haunting monument right in the center of the public square. It stands as a chilling reminder of a stolen youth, a brief existence that carved a permanent bleeding scar into the psychology of an entire municipality. The architect of this nightmare remains securely locked inside a maximum security Midwestern penitentiary. Every appellate motion has spectacularly failed. No courtroom loophole will ever crack open his steel cage. He is condemned to rot within that concrete tomb until his final breath. Meanwhile, in that scarred Midwestern town, whenever dusk bleeds into deep violet and crimson hues, a devastated mother stares into the fading light, searching for a ghost. Certain critical investigations rewrite police protocols. Others completely draft new legislation. But this specific, haunting atrocity shattered something much more primal than mere legalities. It completely destroyed a neighborhood's illusion of safety, forcing them to question the monstrous secrets hiding behind friendly, familiar smiles. You won't find any neat, cinematic resolutions in this kind of darkness. There is only the bloody wreckage left behind, the victims we fiercely immortalize, and the brutal daily psychological warfare required just to keep surviving. Born October 31st, 2010. Her physical existence was stolen, but her powerful echo remains eternally loud. The tragic case of Alayna Ertl is a haunting reminder that the most devastating threats often don't lurk in the dark shadows of the perimeter, but sit right at our dinner tables. This story serves as a profound educational warning about the shattering of blind trust. Alayna was stolen from the sanctity of her bedroom by a trusted family friend who had shared meals and laughter with her parents just hours before committing the unthinkable. The most vital lesson we must carry forward is the necessity of vigilance over familiarity. We often ignore glaring red flags like the suspect's decade-long history of predatory behavior because we want to believe in the inherent goodness of those we know. Ignoring these early warning signs does not make a predator vanish. It only allows the darkness to brew until it erupts into an irreversible nightmare. However, Alayna's legacy also teaches us about the indomitable power of community resilience. Even in the depths of an agonizing abyss, her mother chose to weaponize love against evil, transforming a day of grief into a mission of mercy for others. We must honor Alayna by protecting the innocence of every child and refusing to let the light of humanity be extinguished by the monstrous secrets of a few.